And now we will move on to the color blue. With the slightly underwhelming Academy Drake. Academy Drake is a 3-mana 2/2 with kicker 4. If Academy Drake was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters on it. Again, this card is actually better than it looks. A 3-mana 2/2 in limited, a Windrake, as it were, is about the rate of stuff that you would play in limited. And the fact that it gets better when late in the game, if you flood out or if you draw this later, is really valuable flexibility. You would be perfectly content to pay a 3-mana 2/2 in draft on turn 3. Like, that's about right. And then if you draw this later and you just have a 4/4 flyer, there's not a huge amount of things that beat a 4/4 flyer unlimited. That's a really, really powerful threat. So Academy Drake actually seems like one of the better blue commons that I've seen, certainly. So, again, the flexibility is worth more than it looks. Even if one side or both sides of the rate aren't good, the flexibility makes up for it usually in the end. Academy Journey Mage, 5-mana 3/2 that costs 1 less to cast if you control a wizard. When Academy Journey Mage enters the battlefield, return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. So if you already have a wizard in play, this is a 4-mana mana war to bounce an opposing creature. There is a lot of wizard synergy in this set that I'm sure we'll get to in blue and red. And this one seems like a reasonable complementary wizard to play in your wizard draft deck. Generally, bounce effects, if your deck is fast enough, are very powerful. Getting this to 4 mana is about the most expensive you're willing to play this effect at. So it's important to definitely have wizards in play when you're trying to leverage this card. But if you have a bunch of aggressive wizards and then they play a big blocker and you play Academy Journey Mage, probably winning the game. So it seems medium, but it will probably be a solid role player in the draft wizards deck. Antiquities War. This is a very interesting saga. So Antiquities War is a 4-mana saga. Chapters 1 and 2 allow you to look at the top 5 cards of your library, reveal an artifact card from among those cards, and put it into your hand to put the rest in the bottom. Chapter 3 turns all artifacts you control into creatures with base power toughness 5/5. So you play Antiquities War, get a bunch of artifacts, and then when Chapter 3 triggers, all of your little artifacts turn into 5/5s and presumably, or hopefully, kill your opponent. This card, I think, is low-key very powerful. Or maybe people understand it's powerful. I actually haven't heard of people talk about this card. But the Chapter 3 is really close to win the game in a lot of spots. Granted, you could get blown out by Settle the Wreckage, but that's kind of it. Conventional sweepers wouldn't work in that spot because your artifacts are not creatures on your opponent's turn. So something like Fumigate would not insulate your opponent from dying to Antiquities War. Urz's Ruinous Blast would destroy you, but that's going to be a hard card for people to make work. So if you can just play things like Prophetic Prism or little artifacts that get value to bridge you to Antiquities War, help you survive, and then resolve Chapter 3 of Antiquities War, your opponent's probably dead. So this is a card I definitely expect people to see people build around. Maybe try and make it work with Mox Amber that we'll get to later. There's a lot of cool artifact synergies, both left over from Aether Revolt and Kaladesh, and some ancillary ones in this set itself. So Antiquities War could definitely be the core of an artifact deck that tries to win the game with Chapter 3. Arcane Flight. Arcane Flight is a 1-mana enchantment that gives a creature +1/+1 in flying. This is just if you're in the business for cheap enchantments, and I think we'll get to it later, but I think that there is a card that lets you draw cards when you play enchantments, or allow you to get some value from them. I'll have to remember when we get there. But if there is such a card, cheap enchantments are good, and this one is a cheap one that gives evasion. So, for example, if you put this on Danita Capuchin Paragon, she's a 3/3 flying, endurance, vigilance, lifelink. I think that's all her keywords. She has a bunch. But anyway, that's going to win a lot of races. Granted, you're exposing yourself to removal as you are with any enchantment. That was what kind of makes these inherently bad. But in limited, if you get to do that, that seems dope. You probably win the race. So, yeah, Arcane Flight seems neat in limited. Artificer's Assistant. I actually haven't seen this card yet. 1-mana 1/1 flyer. Whenever you cast a sword spell, scry 1. This is not a bad card. this is a card that can see playing constructed. Potentially, maybe. I don't know. Because 1-mana 1/1s have had legs in constructed before. 1-mana 1/1 flyers have 1 Pro Tours. Generally, their text box has been more tempo-oriented to complement that. This is a little bit more combo-y or long game-centric. But the ability to scry 1 for 0 mana whenever you play cards that you would presumably be playing otherwise, if you're trying to assemble some manner of combo, that seems totally reasonable. I would not be shocked if this card found a home in some manner of combo deck. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but just the ability to scry for free whenever you do stuff you would do just be doing anyway. That's not bad. And also a 1-mana 1/1 trades with like Bomat Courier, Kenra on the following turn. Like, you can actually have this trade with stuff that insulates you against aggro decks, which presumably you're going to have a rough time against already because you're playing a combo deck. So this card, I don't want to rule it out. Maybe a bigger long shot for seeing constructed play than I'm making it, but that text box is good. The text box of whenever you play a historic spell, scry 1, that's a good text box. Whether or not you're willing to abide playing a 1-mana 1/1 flyer to get that text box, we'll see. Befuddle. Befuddle is a 3-mana instant that gives target creature -4/-0 until on turn, draw a card. If you could ever leverage this combat trick, like if, for example, you have like 2 5/5s or whatever, and your opponent's content to trade, and they attack with their 5/5, and then you befuddle it and block, that's a huge blowout. I'm sure there's like other mathematical combinations of attacks and blocks where your opponent would think they would have a profitable attack, and then you get to block with a creature that then kills their creature. But that's kind of what you need to do for befuddle to be good. If the creature is just bouncing, like if they attack with something, you befuddle it and then block, and then they just bounce, that's like whatever. It's sure. It's not really that great. So I'm not sure how common those situations are where your opponent would think they have a profitable attack, they attack, you befuddle them, kills their creature. Seems uncommon. But at worst case scenario, it is a gain 4, draw a card, I guess. So something that you probably won't be super excited to pick in limited, but maybe like a reasonable combat trick if you're strapped on that effect. Blink of an Eye. Blink of an Eye is a 2-mana instant that returns target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, and for the additional kicker of 1 and a blue, you can draw a card as well. This card's pretty good. The fact that you can, for 4 mana, bounce something, draw a card, so you're not like going down a card, is really good. There have certainly been formats where people were just content to play the 2 mana bounce a permanent effect. The fact that this has the upside of not putting you down a card in the process later in the game is pretty good. This will depend largely upon what people want their interactive suite to be, how strapped control decks are to interact with certain permanents, if this interacts with those permanents, etc. But this is on rate. You could see this in constructed. It can definitely pop up. Not sure exactly what decks would want it off the top of my head. There seems to be a lot of other things that in the common color combinations that are better than this. But if you're playing blue-green, for example, they can't interact with permanents very well. Maybe Blink of an Eye is your best option. So this can certainly come up in constructed. Very good in limited. And actually gets better if there's like tokens around. So yeah, seems fine. Cloud Reader Sphinx. Cloud Reader Sphinx is a 5-mana 3/4 that with flying, that when it enters the battlefield, you get to scry 2. This seems like a great limited card. 5-mana 3/4 flyer is a little bit below rate what you would want, but still a sizable flying body that is going to have to be contended with. And then you get to scry 2, which in limited is really good because you have a bunch of bad cards. At least if you draft like me, you have a bunch of bad cards. So yeah, Cloud Reader Sphinx seems like a reasonable blue common. Definitely above average that I would be perfectly happy to play in limited. Cold Water Snapper, a 6-mana 4/5 hexproof. Yo! This card's like also a reasonable common. You would want a bunch of these because it's 6 mana. 6 mana is a bunch. But 4/5 hexproof is not the easiest thing in the world to beat. This could definitely just win the game. It's bigger than most things. Can't get hit by removal. People might be getting snapshot out of the game. So yeah, well, like it depends upon the common sizes of creatures in the format. Maybe 5/5s are more common than I've seen so far. But if a 4/5 rumbles with most stuff, this dude's a problem. Curator's Ward. Curator's Ward is a 3-mana aura enchant permanent. Enchanted permanent has hexproof, and when enchanted permanent leaves the battlefield, if it was historic, draw 2 cards. This is a weird card because it's supposed to be an aura that insulates your other auras from being blown up by removal, but it can still get blown up by removal. So, and it gives the thing hexproof, but if it dies, you draw 2 cards, but it's probably not going to die because it has hexproof now. And if they do it in response, the second line of text doesn't matter, it just fizzles a spell. So this card seems weird to me. I guess if we're like doing the whole enchantment aura thing, you probably play this card. But it's weird that the first line of text in giving it hexproof is directly anti-synergistic with the second line of text. Obviously, the only way they can normally deal with a card with hexproof is a sweeper, and then the second line of text insulates you from a sweeper. It still seems weird though, because it doesn't actually do anything by itself. So maybe like if you're in the business of putting a bunch of pants on a dude, you're probably going to play this card. I'm just not sold on how good that is. Deep Freeze. Deep Freeze is a 3-mana enchantment, enchant creature. Enchanted creature has a base power and toughness of 0/4, has defender, loses all of their abilities, and is a blue wall in addition to its other types. This is actually a really solid removal spell. For a more controlling deck that doesn't care about an 0/4. Like, you obviously wouldn't want to play this in a more aggressive deck because you're giving your opponent an 0/4 blocker, which is going to slow you down a fair amount. But whenever you're playing a slower deck that doesn't care about the 0/4 blocker, this is a reasonable removal spell. Again, for limited. Not really something you would see in Constructed, although worse cards have been played in Constructed. Again, like we were talking about, if you're in a color combination that's strapped for removal, people have played worse cards than this. But I wouldn't recommend it. But yeah, in Limited, if you're playing a slower deck, this card seems great. This is like really close to just like cast out. This is really close to just cast out if you're playing a control deck. So, in Limited. So yeah, if you're playing a slow deck in Limited, this card seems like a pretty high pick. Diligent Excavator is a 2-mana 1/3. Whenever you cast a historic spell, target player puts the top 2 cards of their library into their graveyard. A bunch of people in my stream always ask, hey, can I play mill? Do they make mill cards? Can I play mill now? Maybe. No, I just want to see its target. Yeah, target player. So you can't hit yourself, which I imagine is going to be the more common use of this card, if it sees play at all. Milling yourself to flip over aftermath cards or cards you can get back from the graveyard, or putting cards in the graveyard that you can then get back with like things like the Murari Conjecture or whatever buys things back from the graveyard. That's more likely what this card is going to be played alongside. Milling your opponent out fully with this card, if you want to do that, sure. Like, you could totally do that. I'm not sure how successful you're going to be, but I wish you luck and I hope you have fun. But yeah, Diligent Excavator seems medium. A 2-mana 1/3 doesn't really interact super duper well with a lot of the aggressive creatures in the format. It blocks Fanatical Firebrand. It blocks Kenra after Kenra already hit, because then it made this not block for a turn. Doesn't block Crasher. So, not sold on this card being super good, but if you're in the business of milling people, or you really want to mill yourself over for whatever reason, this card can facilitate that pretty well. So, Divination is one of the like core cards in Magic. It's been around forever. 3-mana sorcery, draw 2. It's pretty basic. We already have things like Glimmer of Genius. I think that we've kind of decided that we really want our card draw to be at instant speed, taking the turn off, especially given how fast a lot of the aggressive decks are in turn 3. Generally going to result in you being dead. So I don't know how much Divination we're going to see, but it is another option for blue decks if they want access to more card draw, specifically for decks surrounding the Murari Conjecture, which we will talk about shortly. You do want a reasonable split of instants and sorceries, so you may be inclined to run Divination over some other instant card draw to even out your split. So it's a reasonable thing to have in the format. It may come up. It's been played and constructed before. It's a little bit below rate for the year 2018, but not so far below rate that it's unplayable. So, may see this card, may not. It depends upon a lot of contextual things that remain to be seen. Homarid Explorer. Homarid Explorer is a 4-mana 3/3 Homarid Scout. Not a crab. Pretty sure it's a crab. I think Homarid is another fancy people word for crab. In any case, when Homarid Explorer enters the battlefield, target player puts the top 4 cards of their library into their graveyard. So, yeah, we mill now, boys. You know, there's 2 mill cards for you guys. You still have Fraying Sanity? Yeah, you could do whatever you want. So yeah, if you're in the business of milling stuff, cool. Again, if you want to mill over yourself for value, there's probably better cards to do it than this one, but sure. So, not really sure what use other than mill I could see for this card, because again, like, there's better cards to mill your own deck over. But yeah, sure, you could mill people with the crab if you're inclined to do that. Go nuts, have fun. In Bolas Clutches. So, In Bolas Clutches is a 4-mana, or 6-mana, I'm sorry, 6-mana legendary enchantment. Enchanted permanent. You control enchanted permanent. It is also legendary. So this is a 6-mana control magic, and it hits any permanent, not just creatures, and it would make the creature or other permanent legendary if it wasn't already. So that synergizes with legendary sorceries. Whatever you take can then enable a legendary sorcery, and that's like the main upside for that. 6-mana control magic, bit slow, but control magic is a very powerful effect, especially when it can hit any permanent, specifically planeswalkers. You could let your opponent get their planeswalker up to ultimate, then play In Bolas Clutches, and then ultimate it yourself. It's a thing that used to happen a lot with Zealous Conscripts. So this is a card that can certainly see some non-zero amount of play. It is very slow. It probably is too slow to main deck in most cases. But it is a tool available to you if you want to deal with planeswalkers or large problematic permanents, like, for example, God Pharaoh's Gift. This is a pretty good to tag a God Pharaoh's Gift with this. They get 1 trigger first, but seems better than abrading it. I don't know. But any permanent that's not a creature that does cool stuff may make In Bolas Clutches worth playing. And speaking of legendary sorceries, we have our next one. This is the blue legendary sorcery. This is Karn's Temporal Sundering. Karn's Temporal Sundering is a 6-mana legendary sorcery. Again, in order to cast a legendary sorcery, you need to control a legendary creature or planeswalker. Target player takes an extra turn after this one. Return up to 1 target non-lane permanent from its owner's hand, or to its owner's hand, I'm sorry, and exile Karn's Temporal Sundering. So this is a time walk for 6 mana that allows you to also bounce a permanent in the process, making some forward progress on the board, which is really good. Normally, the thing you want to do with a time walk effect like this is get value out of the turn you play it. So you're actually making some forward progress on the board. This comes with that built in. Normally, you would do that by just reducing the cost or having some 0 mana effect. Like a Howling Mine or a Planeswalker, for example, which you can still do with this. But the fact that Karn's Temporal Sundering comes pre-attached with a bounce effect, like if your opponent, say for example, you play a Planeswalker, your opponent plays a creature that's trying to pressure the Planeswalker, you untap Karn's Temporal Sundering, bounce your creature, activate my Planeswalker, untap, like you're a million miles ahead. You're a million miles ahead. So this card is very good in conjunction with Planeswalkers, just not only because it needs to be played with a legendary creature or planeswalker, but because planeswalkers allow you to do something the turn you cast Karn's Temporal Sundering for 0 mana, compounding the amount you get to go ahead on board. On a turn, you shouldn't be able to do that stuff. So, this card is probably going to show up, definitely. It depends a lot on the supporting cast you can put around this, but for example, playing this alongside Teferi, that's big game. That's a big deal. Like, if you play Teferi plus untap 2 lands, like seal away your dude, they play another dude, I untap, Karn's Temporal Sundering, bounce your dude, untap my lands, like whole bunch of stuff going on there. That's really good. So definitely look out for Karn's Temporal Sundering, especially alongside cards like Teferi. Merfolk Trickster. Merfolk Trickster is a double blue 2/2 Merfolk Wizard. A lot of relevant card types there. with Flash. When Merfolk Trickster enters the battlefield, tap target creature an opponent controls. It loses all abilities until end of turn. So this is a similar effect we've seen on Merfolk before. Merfolk like Tidebringer, Tidecaller, whatever, it doesn't matter. And it's been good. Just being able to flash in a Merfolk and tap opposing creatures is a reasonably powerful effect. Just playing Merfolk with Flash is good. Playing creatures with Flash is good. One of the weaknesses the Merfolk deck has is its vulnerability to sweepers, and just having a threat that you can like play on end step instead of extending into a sweeper is relevant, like leaving up mana for Spell Snare or whatever, and then if they don't do anything, play Merfolk Trickster, preventing your opponent's creature from attacking to win races. There's a lot of ways to leverage this card. The loses all abilities thing, not sure how often that's going to come up. It could kind of matter against Walking Ballista, although they could, of course, in response, just shoot things off. But if, for example, they don't have a profitable board to shoot with the Walking Ballista in its current state, maybe tapping it matters. There's a lot of like weird little synergies with that. It's hard for me to think of a bunch of them off the top of my head, but I'm sure that line of text will matter. Just mainly 2-minute 2/2 Flash Merfolk that taps a thing when it enters. There's a lot of ways to leverage that proactively on your opponent's turn, defensively. A lot of flexibility to this card, and it will definitely see play in Merfolk. Probably not modern, maybe. I don't know. Definitely standard, and possibly even just in like a wizard deck, just a tempo-y wizard deck, or even just like a normal tempo deck. So we'll see. Very flexible card. Very good card. Definitely going to show up. And now we get to one of my most favorite cards in all of Dominaria that I definitely plan to build a lot of decks with. The Murari Conjecture. The Murari Conjecture is a 5-mana saga. Chapter 1 of Murari Conjecture returns an instant from your graveyard to your hand. Chapter 2 returns a sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. And Chapter 3, until end of turn, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy it. You may choose new targets for the copy. So, we talked about earlier with Antiquities War, the fact that it was okay to do a 4-mana do nothing, because Chapter 3 was close to win the game. Same thing applies to the Murari Conjecture. You pay 5 mana, it does nothing, you just get some cards back. But granted, the cards you're getting back are instants and sorceries, so they're going to be generally removal spells you can then use to deal with your opponent's board that they developed while you did nothing. And then if you survive to Chapter 3, your opponent's probably dead. If they're not dead, you're super far ahead. Just being able to reverberate spells from 0 mana, like just having that effect without investing anything on that turn to get it, is incredibly strong. For example, alongside card we'll get to in a bit, Jaya's Immolating Inferno, it's essentially a fireball, or Torment of Hailfire. Reverberating either of those effects likely just kills your opponent outright. If you play this alongside cards like Tormenting Voice or Opt, it turns them into actual card draw spells for very low cost of mana. You can reverberate removal spells to turn them into sweepers to clear the board. The Chapter 3 of the Murari Conjecture is going to probably stabilize you and sometimes just straight win the game. So this is a card I'm super excited to build around. I think is very strong. I think it's going to show up a lot and gives you an incentive to actually not play Torrential Gearhulk, as insane as that sounds, and play a deck that just presents no targets for Vraska's Contempt or removal of any kind, and wins through this card, side-skirting a lot of the common removal in the format, and still packing as much of a punch as Torrential Gearhulk. So I'm very excited to build different shells with the Murari Conjecture. I think this card is very strong, and I think it gives you an incentive to not play Torrential Gearhulk. You probably are supposed to play Torrential Gearhulk with this, though. Maybe I'm just a crazy person, but it seems very strong to me. Nough Bond, Dean of Veneration, is a legendary 2-mana 2/1 human wizard. If a wizard enters the battlefield under your control, if a wizard entering the battlefield under your control causes a triggered ability of opponent you control to trigger it again. So any wizard that hasn't entered the battlefield effect triggers this again. Anything that a wizard triggers, it doesn't even need to necessarily be something that the wizard has. Like if you have some artifact that does something when creatures enter the battlefield and the creature that triggered it is a wizard, Nough Bond would cause that trigger to copy. So this card, just being a 2-mana legend, is an important thing for other cards in the format, like Mox Amber, which we'll talk about later. Enabling legendary sorceries. Just being a cheap legend is good in its own right. Being a wizard, there's synergies there, enabling cards like Wizard's Lightning and Wizard's Retort. So I think even outside of the reverberating or panharmoniconing triggers on the side of Nough Bond, you can still certainly want that upside, but there's a lot of other things going on with this card that give it some upside. So as long as you're getting some value out of the text box, it will be generally good enough to play. So we'll have to see what kind of things. There actually aren't really many wizards with enters the battlefield triggers. We saw the Merfolk, but tapping 2 things is, like, I guess a little bit better. Not really what you want to be fueling with this. Mainly, I think you'll have to find something that has its own trigger from creatures entering the battlefield, and then play wizards to trigger it, and Nough Bond does things with that. Would be my expectation based upon the current card pool of enters the battlefield wizards. And now we have the Master Wizard, Naru Mayhaw. Master Wizard, 4 mana 3/3, legendary human wizard with Flash. When Naru Mayhaw enters the battlefield, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. Other wizards you control get +1/+1. So, this card I don't think is very good. The fact that it is a wizard lord may matter, and if you're content to play a 3 mana, like 4 mana 3/3 wizard lord, maybe that's good enough. The text box of copy a spell you control is not going to come up a huge amount of the time. Because of how much mana it takes. Because it has to be your spell, so you have to play the mana to cast that spell and Naru Mayhaw on the same turn. So Naru Mayhaw kind of acts as a kicker to whatever spell you're playing, which is good. Like, that's not bad at all. But I think that in most cases, with most decks, the 4 mana kicker is going to be too expensive. It's possible I'm wrong on that, but it's definitely a very large investment on an especially fragile creature. Because in a lot of cases, unless you're playing a bunch of wizards, the 3/3 body is not going to matter a lot. So say, for example, like, you have a Vraska's Contempt, and you Vraska's Contempt, Naru Mayhaw, reverberate the Vraska's Contempt, kill something else. That's, like, pretty good, but that's 8 mana, and you have this 3/3 for value. Actually, the more I think about this is better than I thought. I was trying to make an argument to say why it's not good, and it's like, no, it's fine. So I think that this card is very slow. Certainly very slow. You have to invest a lot of mana to get upside, but the upside is sizable. So I think you do need to be playing this alongside some other wizards. I think that the wizard pump needs to matter. I'm not sure you can just play this naked for the trigger, although that's possible. But we'll have to see some shells. I think this card is underwhelming, but I'm not as confident about it as I was to really argue about it. So we'll see how that card ends up. Opt, already, this is just a reprint. Opt is already in Standard. We already have this. We know what it does. Just a very good cantrip. Now you get a cool Teferi art, though. If you want this, you get cool Teferi art. This is definitely better art than the one we had before with the pirate. Not close. Precognition Field. Precognition Field is a 4 mana enchantment that allows you to look at the top card of your library. You get to look. Your opponent doesn't see it. It's not revealed. And you may cast the top card of your library if it's an instant or sorcery. This is very similar to like Oracle of Moldiah or Courser of Crufix, except for instance and sorceries. This is an interesting card. It also has the ability to exile the top card of your library for 3 mana if it's a card you don't want. So, this card is obviously a recurring value engine to let you play cards off the top of your deck, essentially drawing them, giving you more value. The interesting about this card is that most instants and sorceries are going to be reactive. That's not always the case, but in general, you're going to have removal spells or things like that that may not be useful when they're on top of your deck. So it won't be uncommon for there to be spots where you have Precognition Field in play, you reveal a removal spell on top of your deck, and your opponent doesn't have a creature that it hits profitably. And then you can't really use Precognition Field. So you may have to build your deck more proactively if you're interested in playing with Precognition Field. It's possible that the format's creature heavy enough where your removal spells are always good. Just things you have to consider, that given the generally reactive nature of instants and sorceries and the situational nature of those cards, there's going to be some situations where you have a card on top of your deck with Precognition Field that you can't really tap profitably. So I do think this card will probably show up. It seems like a reasonable sideboard card. In slow games, this is definitely good. But you have to invest 4 mana up front. It's just pay 4 mana to do nothing. It has to have pretty high upside in the back end to justify that. And in some matchups that are going long that you're not going to die initially, yeah, the upside's pretty good. So this is a reasonable sideboard card. Probably see some amount of it in control mirrors and potentially in other spots, but generally in slow matchups. Relic Runner. I've not seen this card yet. Relic Runner is a 2-mana 2/1 human rogue. Relic Runner cannot be blocked if you cast a historic spell this turn. I think that there's better aggressive things to do in blue, but in limited, if you're like a 2-mana 2/1 is just a fine thing to play in limited, a reasonable 2-drop, and making it unblockable with other synergy in your deck seems fine. Likely not something we're going to see in constructed, but this is certainly a card that synergizes with a lot of the format for limited, so seems like a pretty reasonable 2-drop if you're interested in playing blue in limited. Rescue, 1 blue. Return target permanent you control to its owner's hand. So this is kind of a bad blossoming defense. If someone tries to kill something you control, you have 1 blue open, you can return it to your hand before it dies. Effects like this are generally not good because of how mana intensive they are. So for example, like if you have like a 4-drop creature or even a 3-drop creature, you attack with it, your opponent tries to kill it, you rescue it in response, then you have to reinvest the mana to redeploy it. You're putting yourself pretty far behind. If you're playing things that are super important, then maybe that's worth it. You're willing to take the mana cost on the chin to preserve whatever powerful effect that creature or permanence is providing. Maybe that's the case. It's also possible that because this says permanent, you could abuse this with enters the battlefield triggers. Maybe there's some artifact you want to bounce for 1 mana. That's likely the more powerful home for this. Playing it fair is pretty underwhelming. If you're bouncing something with enters the battlefield value for some manner of combo, that seems more in line with what this card is probably wanting to do. So reasonable-ish limited card as a combat trick, or at least protection spell. Probably if we see any amount of play in constructed, it's going to be in some kind of combo deck. Sage of Latnam is a 2-mana 1/2 human artificer that allows you to sacrifice an artifact and draw a card. That could be reasonable, again, if you're sacrificing artifacts for value. We have Scrap Trawler in Aether Revolt that we're going to be having access to when that comes to MTGA. So this, alongside that, may form some kind of engine, giving you a sack outlet for your artifacts, getting value in the process. Maybe that plays. It's still a pretty fragile 2-drop. Unclear how in need you are of a sacrifice effect for artifacts. Maybe this is the best one, maybe it's not. But if you do want to sacrifice your artifacts, this seems like a reasonable way to do it. It's limited. You only do it 1 per turn. Maybe we'll have to see if that's a good enough value engine, what combo you're trying to put it in. But that's likely where this will show up if you're just trying to sacrifice artifacts for value as part of some recursion loop with Scrap Trawler or something. Sentinel of the Pearl Trident. 5-mana 3/3 Merfolk Soldier with Flash. When Sentinel of the Pearl Trident enters the battlefield, you may exile target historic permanent you control. If you do, return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So Sentinel of the Pearl Trident allows you to blink a permanent, essentially. A historic permanent specifically. So you can blink a Saga. Say, for example, if you play a Saga, triggers Chapter 1, you untap, it goes to Chapter 2, you can then play Sentinel of the Pearl Trident to make Chapter 1 trigger again, then Chapter 2 trigger, and then you would still get Chapter 3. So I'm not sure if that's something we really want to be doing in constructed, but this actually seems like a reasonably powerful card in draft to recur Sagas and keep getting value from them. I think a 5-mana 3/3 is like not a good enough body to justify that effect, as cute as it is in constructed. But in limited, certainly, this will probably come up. I'm not sure how highly you value this. It depends upon the Sagas you're playing, how much you want to recur those. But this seems like a solid role player if you have a Saga heavy deck. This one's pretty funny. Sinvoda, the Rising Deep, 8-mana 8/8 with Kicker 2. When Sinvoda, the Rising Deep, enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return all creatures to their owner's hands, except Merfolk, Kraken, Leviathan, Octopuses, and Serpents. The reason this card is funny is because Kicker is supposed to usually be like, you have a cheap-ish creature and then flood protection with the Kicker. This is just an 8-drop that, like, you know what? If you just can't wait for turn 10, if you have to play this on 8 mana, you get an 8/8. If 10's too far away, you just need to play it on 8, you can do that. Just play a vanilla 8/8. This card's a bit of a meme. Even in limited, it would have to see how slow the format is, how often you're getting it at 10 mana. We do have Power Stone. Maybe you do get to 10 mana. If you're ever conceivably getting to 10 mana in limited, this card's effect is very powerful. I just don't know how often that's happening. We'll have to see the texture of the format, how things pan out. But if you have to do extra stuff to get to 10 mana, yeah, we don't want to play that. This isn't an 8 mana 8/8 with kicker. This is a 10 mana 8/8 with its ability. You're never playing this for 8. Never playing this for 8. Alright, Syncopate. This is a very relevant reprint, and this is likely a side effect of what happens when you put Llanowar Elf into the format, a card we will get to later. That is the most powerful card in the set. So Syncopate is a counterspell. It is 1 blue X instant. Counter target spell unless the controller pays X. If its spell's countered, exile it instead of putting it into the graveyard. So say for example, you have 2 mana open, your opponent taps out for a card, you can play Syncopate for 2, X being 1, they can't pay the 1, their spell gets countered. And then in the late game, if there's very important spells you're trying to prevent them from casting, you can like tap out like 5 mana or whatever to make Syncopate a close to hard counter. You have to invest a lot to do that, but it has late game value in the same way that Censor has late game value in being able to be cycled. The late game value of Syncopate is that it can still be a relevant counterspell into the later turns of the game, although much less efficiently. Syncopate, though, has been a card that has been played a lot in previous standard formats, and just gives blue decks a way to interact on turn 2, which they're going to need to do because people are going to be playing 3-drops on turn 2 through Llanowar Elf. So this is a card that probably doesn't come back to standard unless we have 1-drop mana accelerants, which we now do. So this is largely a response to give blue decks enough interaction to contend with the threats they're going to be seeing moving forward into Dominaria. So Syncopate is going to probably be one of the mainstays in blue control. It's interesting how you want to split this with Censor. I'm not the biggest blue mage in the world. I don't know exactly which one I value more. I kind of like both. Maybe you want to play 8. You do definitely don't interact on turn 2, so maybe that's possible. We'll see. But this is definitely going to show up a lot. It's just a matter of numbers. Tempest Djinn. Tempest Djinn is the second of the monocolored payoff cards we were talking about before. Tempest Djinn is a triple blue 0/4 Djinn with flying, and it gets +1/+0 for each basic island you control. So obviously if your first 3 lands you play are basic islands, you get to play this on turn 3 as a 3-mana 3/4 flyer, which is very good. You can then play your land drop on the 4th turn, attack as a 4/4. This is definitely a reasonable incentive to play mono blue. One of the downsides of this card is it does have 4 toughness, which again dies to Glorybringer, Chandra, a lot of things. But I think that this card interacts very well with favorable wins. A 2-mana enchantment that gives all of your flyers +1/+1. I think in a mono blue deck, you would be playing mostly flyers, be a bit of a tempo-oriented deck. Favorable Winds interacts well with all those cards, in addition to getting Tempest Djinn to 5 toughness, making it much more resilient. So I think that there will be some manner of mono blue flyers, tempo-y type deck, and Tempest Djinn is going to be one of the bigger payoffs for doing so. Tetsu Kumazawa, Fugitive, 2-mana 1/3. Legendary Human Rogue. Creatures you control with power or toughness of 1 can't be blocked this turn. So the first thing that came to my mind with this creature is prowess. Things like Soulscar Mage and Monastery Swiftspear is not legal anymore. But anything that has starts with 1 power or 1 toughness with prowess, you can attack with those. Your opponent can't block. Before damage, like play a spell, pump them all, do your damage. So Tetsu Kumazawa seems reasonably synergistic with some of the wizards, even though he is not a wizard, because there is a 2/1 prowess and a Merfolk or a Naga wizard in Amonkhet, and there is a 1/2 Soulscar Mage. So you can attack with both of those creatures, for instance, when you have Tetsu Kumazawa in play. Your opponent can't block them, and then after blocks before damage, play like a Wizard Lightning to their face, deal a bunch to them, Something like that. That's how I would imagine you leverage this card. Whether or not that effect is worth it remains to be seen. This likely seems like a sideboard card. You can bring it in where your opponent's trying to stop your tempo by blocking. It seems like a reasonably powerful option in that spot. But yeah, that's the main way I see leveraging this. You could also potentially do 1/1 tokens generated through whatever. But Prowess, I think, is the most powerful way to leverage Tetsu Kumazawa. Time of Ice is a 4-mana saga. Chapters 1 and 2 are tap target creature an opponent controls. It doesn't untap during its controller's untap step for as long as you control Time of Ice. And then Chapter 3 returns all tapped creatures to their opponent's hands. So this card slows down the game a lot. Very flavorful. Time of Ice, very slow. Get it? So you can kind of pump the brakes on your opponent's aggression. And this is actually really good because this does something the turn you play it. The turn you play Time of Ice, you get to lock down an opposing creature. Like if they have one creature in play, you play Time of Ice, that creature's not attacking you next turn. And then you go back to your turn, untap. If they played another creature, you get to tap it. And if they didn't play another creature, you're under no pressure and you can do whatever you want to do. So Time of Ice actually seems very good in control-oriented decks. It's possible that we may see some kind of Bant Saga's permanent control deck where all of your interaction is permanents and you can like play 6-mana Ajani to draw a bunch of cards, play things like Nissa to rebuy them from the graveyard. Maybe there's something going on there, but Time of Ice is definitely a very solid option for control decks. It just buys you a million years. Like this just completely slows down your opponent. Granted, it's bad against haste creatures. This is not the best card in the world against mono red. Doesn't interact well against like Walking Ballista or stuff like that. It can't hit vehicles. There's certainly weaknesses in this card, but there are a fair amount of matchups where I think that this slows down the game enough that you would be inclined to play it. So it seems like something that certainly may show up. Definitely limited. This seems kind of nutty and limited. But I think that this is like kind of on the verge of constructed. Tellurian Scholar is a 3-mana 2/3 human wizard. Seems medium. It's a wizard you can play to enable wizard synergies in limited at below average rate, but is what it is. Unwind. Unwind is an interesting card to evaluate. I actually don't know how I feel about Unwind. It is a 3-mana instant that allows you to counter target non-creature spell and then untap up to 3 lands. This effect has been seen on other cards like Rewind, which is a 4-mana cancel that lets you untap 4 lands after it resolved. This one only hits non-creature spells, which are generally not proactive. They can still be planeswalkers, they can still be artifacts, they can still be sagas, and maybe with the addition of sagas, this card becomes good enough where you're going to have enough proactive things your opponent is trying to do to disrupt. But generally, if you're only hitting reactive elements, this card becomes a lot more awkward because it's 3 mana, you're leaving up a lot of mana to protect whatever you're trying to do. But if enough of the proactive elements in Standard are non-creature spells, if they're planeswalkers, if they're sagas, if they're artifacts, Unwind becomes pretty strong. And that's just even baseline, you could kind of get cute and combine it with things like Gift of Paradise, so the land you untap is worth 2 mana. You can actually ramp with it a bit. There are some cute synergies you can enable with Unwind, but in general, I think that it's mainly going to be something blue decks go towards if we start seeing a high density of sagas, planeswalkers, and non-creature artifacts. Vodalian Arcanist. Vodalian Arcanist is a 2-mana 1/3 that adds 1 colorless to your mana pool after being tapped. That mana can only be spent to cast instant or sorcery spells. This is very interesting. There was one other point in time where blue had a mana creature for instants and sorceries in Innistrad block, and I don't remember it seeing much play. But this is a 1/3. It blocks fairly well. Not the best, but it can rumble with some early aggressive creatures. And the main thing with this is you have to have a proactive instant or sorcery to cast on turn 3 as a 4-drop. So how many proactive 4-mana instant or sorceries are there? I can't think of any off the top that I would like be wanting to ramp into with this. They would have to like affect the board in order to really matter. Mana creatures are valuable because they allow you to get on board so much faster than your opponent, so you constantly have initiative for the rest of the game. It's why Landmar Elf is the best card in the set. We'll talk about that later. But unless you are doing something proactive to get ahead on board, or at least build towards some end game, which I'm not sure you can do through only instants and sorceries, this card probably isn't good enough. It's something to look at, like just like gather research the instants and sorcery, see like what 4 mana ones it interacts profitably with, what matters, like why you would do this instead of playing Landmar off or whatever. It's probably not good enough, but worth consideration. Likely just a thing for limited. Weight of Memory. Weight of Memory is a 5 mana sorcery that allows you to draw 3 cards, and then target player puts the top 3 cards of their library into their graveyard. So many mill cards, although most of these are just for yourself. You're supposed to do it to yourself. But in any case, Weight of Memory is a 5 mana sorcery, draw 3. It's actually been a bit since we've had this in Standard. I think the last one was Jace's Ingenuity, and that one is instant, which is much, much better. I don't think that there's going to be a lot of spots where you're able to take off turn 5 to draw 3 cards. There are better things to do than Weight of Memory. For example, if you're interested in playing a 5 mana do nothing card that gets value, the Murari Conjecture is way better than this. Murari Conjecture lets you rebuy specific spells, and its Chapter 3 lets you kind of just straight win the game. Oh, thank you very much, Merchant, for the host. Welcome, everyone. We are doing our Dominaria set review. And I have to redo that part for the video now, but that's fine. I appreciate you all hanging out with us. But yeah, so Weight of Memory, I don't think that you can afford to tap out on turn 5 for doing nothing. There's better ways to get value in this format. There's better ways to like go up cards in your opponent. Murari's Conjecture, for example, lets you get specific cards back and has Chapter 3 that kind of wins the game. So I think that there are definitely better ways to draw cards. I don't really want to tap out to draw 3 in this format. I feel like I'd just be dead if I did that. Wizard's Retort. Wizard's Retort is one of the Wizard synergy spells. Wizard's Retort is a 3 mana instant counterspell, but if you control a wizard, it costs 1 less and becomes literal counterspell, which is obviously very strong. There certainly seems to be the shell for a very tempo-oriented Wizards deck that I think could be very strong, and Wizard's Retort would certainly be part of it. We've seen people are generally content to play cancel. Usually there's cancels with upside. We've seen like Dissolve is cancel, Scribes 1, Dissipate is cancel, but the thing gets exiled. Disallow can hit triggers. This one's upside is sometimes it's 2 mana. So this is definitely a card that'll see play, especially if you are trying to be a little bit more tempo-oriented. If the mana cost reduction matters, you're trying to leverage that. And it seems like a lot of the Wizards are certainly trying to do that. So this is a card that will definitely show up a lot, definitely be a part of Wizard decks, and is definitely pretty strong. Zahid, Djinn of the Lamp. Now, Zahid, Djinn of the Lamp, is a 6 mana 5/6, but not really. Because he has an ability that allows you to pay 4 mana and tap an untapped artifact you control, rather than paying his mana cost. He also has flying, worthy note. So this is essentially, if you have an artifact in play, a 4 mana 5/6 flyer, which is a little bit above rate. A little bit above rate. So this is going to be a pretty big payoff for playing artifact decks. If you're playing like Prophetic Prism or even some vehicles like Heart of Kirin, stuff like that. But all of those synergize very well with Zahid, Djinn of the Lamp. You could even make Thopters or Servos and tap those to make Zahid come out early. He is just a big vanilla creature, but he's a very big vanilla creature that rumbles with a lot of the most important cards in the format. We saw Lyra earlier. This tangles with Lyra, Scarab God, Hazaret, Glorybringer, Rekindling Phoenix. Zahid can block all of them. So even though he's just a big vanilla creature, the context of the whole format together and like what his numbers are makes him very powerful. So getting him out early, getting ahead on board, staying ahead on board, he's very resilient to like damage-based removal. He has 6 toughness. It's going to allow you to stabilize to do whatever nonsense it is you're doing with your other artifacts. So Zahid is going to show up. Zahid's going to be a big player in Standard because he has a body to match kind of whatever.